Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Waking Alive podcast. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and today I am joined with mother of three, and she also happens to work in the financial field, Sherleen Udasco. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, my dear.
How are you? How is everything going? Living life?
Yeah, everything is going really well. My little baby will be 6 months next week, so that's pretty exciting. The time flies. I'm realizing, and then of course, you getting close to the holiday season with the and with school and everything. So yeah, time definitely flies and all of that. How are you?
I'm good. For some of you that know, I recently got married in October, so that was fascinating. We went on our honeymoon, which I will talk more about that in a not podcast video, but it was very fabulous. And now I have a couple of friends I'm hanging out with before they go to another country. And I'm just pretty excited about the rest of the year. I
Mhm.
can't complain. Okay, so since you just became a mother of three,
Yeah.
how did you, well, before I get into that, would you like to tell your audience a little bit about yourself so they can understand how you became here?
Sure, how I got here? Absolutely. So I grew up in New England, and I have, let me see, I'm the oldest of five. I have four sisters. Very blue collar, hardworking family. My parents both worked, multiple jobs. So, not as many resources maybe as others, but it was a lot of fun. So having a lot of siblings is can be very nerve-wracking sometimes, but mostly a lot of fun. So I really, enjoyed that part of my childhood. When I graduated high school, I went into the military. I was stationed in California, which is where I met my husband. And so we worked both in the same kind of field. And then basically early, well, I guess around 2010 timeframe, we got married, and then we moved, to the Southeast, and now we're here, and we've been here ever since. And it's basically the nature of his work. Really, it's kind of a weird military experience, but we don't, travel as much as maybe, other jobs. So yeah, so we've been here for at least a decade, which is kind of weird, being a military family. But it definitely allowed us to plant some roots, which is nice, and create some community, which is really, really lovely, and allowed me to, get into finance and work in that kind of field. And yeah, so it's been an interesting journey for sure, but just filled with a lot of meaning and a lot of joy at the same time. So yeah, a lot of family kind of threads, I guess, in that journey, if you
Mm.
put it that
It's
way.
always good to have roots planted down because I know, like you said, it's kind of, I wouldn't say abnormal, but being in military families, it's some people move around like every 2 to 3 years, and the fact that you're here a decade is fabulous. And I'm
It's
sure
it
it helps kids too.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful for the kids. What I would tell you though, Emily, is,
Mhm.
what's funny is it's not something I actually wanted. I've always kind of felt myself more of a wanderer, so it was very bizarre to me. I kind of was thinking,
Mm.
okay, well, we have this military lifestyle. It's like, why am I not moving around? And so I could tell you in the very beginning, I just was a little bit like, okay, really? Like, really? You know? Um, but now I'm certainly grateful for it. But it's just kind of interesting how that happens. Like I actually was excited for the traveling,
Mhm.
and then I didn't experience that. And so I just a little bit ironic, I guess. I don't know.
Mhm. Your husband has been traveling without you though,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. You definitely still have the deployments and everything. And so it really, I definitely feel for the folks and have a lot of I can't really empathize, but eh, you know, I have a lot of compassion for those who have to do it, especially for the military spouses, whose counterparts, do leave and do deploy, and they also have to do the PCS thing by themselves. I mean, it's a whole thing,
Mhm.
it's a whole thing, and yeah, I feel a lot of gratitude that I didn't have to do it that way, but also a lot of compassion, a lot of yeah, my heart goes out to those folks who have to do that because it's a
Mhm.
job.
Mhm. Would you say it's being like a mom is harder that way in a sense, instead of having two like people together all the time? Do you think it's a lot harder, or do you think you have more support that way, or do you have like less support?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, Emily. So um first off the bat, I will tell you, so I don't know what it's like to be a single, like an actual single parent,
Mhm.
right? But whatever taste of it that I have, doing it like this, I have a lot of respect
Mhm.
and compassion, for the single parents out there because I wouldn't say that, I guess that the word support, can mean different things. I definitely feel like I have community. I have people who reach out, who want
Mhm.
to help. A lot of friends, who just pour love, into my children and are always who make themselves available. But it is definitely different. You
Mhm.
know, my children are very they're very active in extracurriculars, which is kind of funny because I never was. I was such a hermit. But so it's weird to have like these children who are very social. But I was thinking about the other day, and it's like a third of my day is just driving them around,
Mhm.
and when my husband is here, it's like that's just one thing that gets taken off the table for me, and
Mhm.
you notice it, and
Mhm.
so it's interesting. So it's like I definitely notice the differences. Um, but I guess for me, something like the first couple deployments, I was really stressing out about it,
Mhm.
and really, really not feeling the support because you have someone there all the time and they're helping you, and all of a sudden, they're just gone. And I remember the first couple months, I just was really like upset about it. But now when I think about it, part of that, part of the support comes from you reaching out for support,
Mhm.
right? So you can't, if you don't ask, that's kind of on you. And so that was definitely on me, right, for not asking because I feel like I do believe that people will be there if you reach out, right?
Mhm.
Most people want to be helpful. I just believe that. Um, but it's definitely different, especially with the little baby. So he left when she was about 3 months old.
Mhm.
Um, and that was interesting because it's funny because the first 3 months, and this is true for the other two kids, he was the one that would always because I do nurse, but he would do everything else. So it's like, okay, go get the baby and change the diaper, and then finally I get to nurse, but I kind of just like lay there, right, and just nurse, and that's that. And so having to do all the other stuff, it's weird because it's so minute, right? It takes nothing to just get out of bed and go get the kid, but it does. Like when it's like 1 a.m. in the morning and you're just like your body's just like dead, you definitely notice it. So I guess that was this about me already. I'm way very long-winded, but a very long-winded way of saying there is support, but it's just different, right? And
Mhm.
you have to reach out to people to get
Mhm.
that kind of support. But here's what I would tell you is that the moments where he's not here, um, when he comes back, I'm extra grateful.
Mhm.
So it's weird because, deployments can do different things to the dynamic of a relationship. And I would say overall, it's probably helped ours,
Mhm.
just because I see all the things I don't have when he's not here. So I'm even more grateful when he is. And I think he would say the same thing as well.
Mhm. That's a good way to put it. Because I know my husband's only been gone for like 2 months so far out of what have you. And I know that was a very long time, but then it
Yeah.
didn't seem very long. Do you think now that you have more kids, do you feel like the deployments are longer?
Oh my goodness.
Like they
Uh,
feel longer, I should say.
yeah, yeah, that is. I have to think about that one. I don't, um, okay. They don't feel longer,
Mhm.
but they do feel, um, I like them less and less. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
like I'm sure that that's obvious for like, especially for most people. But here's what I would say about that. So,
Mhm.
as the kids get older, and as I add, like, I have like a little one now, um, it's just that. So number one, I don't like the fact that my husband has to miss. This is their last child, and there's quite a gap, between the
Mhm.
baby and then my other daughter is she's 9, so it's like a decade, right? So he has to miss that. I don't love that. And then also there's just so much more packed in, right? Because the older your kids get, like then now they're starting to choose their interests and what they're interested in, what kind of extracurriculars they want to do. And so it's just adding more driving time, so it's like the time actually feels less just because the days are so packed with things. But because the days are so packed with things, I could really use the help. You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
I guess that's what I mean when I say, yeah, it's definitely becoming less of a novelty um these days for sure.
Their own little individual human beings. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it's weird.
Hmm. So how did you know, like back in the day, like after you got married and whatnot, when did you and your husband decide like, oh, we want to be parents, you want to be a mom? Or did that something that just kind of happened?
So I definitely didn't just happen, because they were planned for
Mhm.
sure. Um it was funny because I would say even the little baby was planned, but I just had forgotten that I planned her. And I'll circle back around to that in a minute
Okay,
because it sounds kind of stupid, and I
that
get
sounds
it.
interesting.
Um, yeah. So, no, so as I mentioned before, my upbringing, lots of kids everywhere, lots of
Mhm.
just things, and just a lot of stimulation because all my siblings, and I really love that. And so, children and that environment, I've never been averse to. So I know for some people it's like maybe it just comes to them, or
Mhm.
maybe they always know. And for me, it was more of like I was never opposed to being a mother
Mhm.
ever. I love like teaching, and I love nurturing, and I love, like watching little babies and like little children develop. I love it even with my own little like siblings, it was a wonderful thing to see them grow. So I was never opposed to it, but I would say that I knew that I wanted to be a mother. And not to sound like cliche or weird or, like
Mhm.
romantic comedy, but like, but I probably knew I wanted to be a mom probably when I met my husband.
Mhm.
He just comes from a very loving family, and he's a very loving person, and yeah, I don't know, he's a lot of fun, and I thought, yeah, I thought we could create something really cool. And so it was kind of nice because I guess he felt the same way. So we knew. What's funny is we knew we wanted to have kids probably before we knew most of everything else. So there's that. But yeah, so as soon as we got married, had the kid pretty much right away. So that was exciting. And then so to kind of talk about that comment I made, right? So I always knew I wanted to have 3 kids, Emily. I just there was something about that number that just, that just stuck out to me that I really that made me feel really resolute in that number. And so when I had my middle child, so my first daughter, um, I thought, okay, I'm gonna have another kid, and then it just didn't happen, right? But I always wanted 3. And I would tell people, yeah, 3 kids would be nice. And then over time, like it just didn't happen, and I was like,
Mhm.
well, maybe just 2 is just meant to be.
Mhm.
And then of course, when you finally come to terms with the fact you're only going to have 2 kids, it's like, that's fine, a beautiful family. And then all of a sudden I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that's how this is going to happen. you know so yeah, so it's kind of funny. So I always say, she was always planned. We just did, I guess, just a little bit delayed, maybe. I don't know. So
Or
yeah, but
maybe it was like maybe the time where you are right now is maybe when she needed to come in for you,
yeah, yeah,
or vice versa.
yeah.
Um, Do you think it would be like back in the day a little bit? I mean, your oldest you said was 9, right? So, I mean,
No,
like
oldest is
oldest
12.
oldest 12, daughter
Yeah,
is 9.
9,
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. So, like 12 years ago, I mean, like if you had all 3 kids during that time span, like do you think you would be like more as prepared as you are to have this little one now that you have?
So it's really I really want to give you like yes and no answers. There's a part of me that because I don't want to be long-winded, but I will say this. Prepared is there's different ways to look at that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would say being in my 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mid 30s, uh, I am more probably emotionally prepared and
Mm-hmm.
maybe more mentally prepared. Uh,
Mm.
and I guess, honestly, Emily, I don't even like the word prepared. I would say knowledgeable, right? So
Mm.
more emotionally
Wisdom.
knowledgeable. Because I think prepared is a fallacy, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're ever really prepared. You can have the things and you can do the nesting and have all of that. But when you have a kid and then, after you leave, for those who have like a birth in a hospital, when you leave the hospital, you kind of look at, and I remember my husband and I looking at ourselves, at each other, thinking, okay, so they're gonna let us home, like with the,
What are
they're
we
gonna
doing?
send us home with this kid, like what are we supposed to do? And so it's funny because with my son, my parents were in town for a while. His parents were in town, and so we had family still, like for the first couple weeks. And then when they left, we were just like, oh my gosh, like we really are left to our own devices. Like, what are we, what are we supposed to do? So what I would say is the things that you make matter with your first kid
Mm-hmm.
are different by the time you have your third kid. At least that's true for me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that translates into is more patience. You laugh at way more things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So more things are funny as opposed to stressful. Um, and I don't know. I feel like with this child, I'm more focused on um being present with her, I would say, like in the moments that
Mm.
aren't like the photo moments, right? But just like the regular everyday
Mm-hmm.
and really enjoying that. And I don't know, maybe part of it is that she's the last one for me. And so, I've heard parents say with the last kid's a little bit different, but and with my son, I wanted to make sure like, we were that he was reading, that he was not that he was so from an educational point of view, right, that he was hitting the milestones and that I was nourishing his little brain and his little mind.
Mm-hmm.
That was of utmost importance to me, right? We would do the flashcards, we would go outside and here, this is a tree, and you know what I mean, like feel the grass and like all this kind of stuff. So with my first child, I wanted to expose him to everything, because I wasn't really sure what was important, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, give him shelter, give him food, give him clothing, give him love, um, right? Then what? But I think with my baby now, there's more of a sense of urgency for me to just spend the time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still spending time with my son because I was stay at home with him. Um, but it's like, I don't know, I guess maybe you're just more in the moment, with the
Mm-hmm.
one. I will tell you, so I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they have so that's on the mental emotional side. As far as being prepared, like logistically, I don't know if you've ever seen the like the Loves commercials
Mm.
where the right, so it's like, oh, first kid, and you see the parent, she's got like all the luggage, they
Yeah.
like and all this stuff, and then it's like, wow, the second kid, and she got like a diaper and like a thing of wipes.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Whoever marketed that was a genius, because I would say from the logistical side, right, being prepared, you really start to pare down what you actually need and
Mm-hmm.
what you don't need in various situations. And I will say that definitely makes it less stressful. With my son, it
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh my God, we don't have this particular bottle or this particular pacifier or this particular this, like, oh my gosh, like what if we need it? And at least for me, I was freaking out way more. Now, like yesterday, I took my kids to dinner and we totally forgot the diaper bag completely, right? My son, I was like, we got out of the car and
Oh,
did you grab it? And he's like, no, mom, I thought you grabbed it. And I was like, oh,
okay.
okay. And then we just didn't have a diaper bag. you
I
know,
mean,
and
like
like 12 years ago, that would have been like, I would have driven
panic.
back home just to get the stupid diaper bag. But yeah, so I would say you're definitely more prepared in many ways down the line. But again, like prepared is, I don't like that word because you so
Mm,
much on the job
yeah.
learning.
Mm, I think I'll probably agree with you whenever I have kids. I don't know. Back to that three thing. Like, I'm glad you said that because honestly, back in like, I'm not that much older, like younger than you. So, like, I know like the max I want to have is three, but I would be fine with just one if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but I always feel like the third one might be an accident. I don't know why, but I just have this thing like the third one might be the accident, if anything.
Yeah.
And I'm really like into like because I'm thinking about it now because I am married. So eventually one day I would like to have a baby and be a mom. But right now I'm just a fur baby mom, right? And but the things I look at, a lot of things like they're like the internet or whatever, and they're like, oh, you should buy this, you should buy this, blah blah blah. And then I'm like, that's a lot. Like I remember back in the day when my mom had me, she didn't have all that, and we turned out just fine,
I know.
functional people. So I'm like, yeah, it might make you easier, but then there's like research and all this that makes you scared to buy things and yada yada yada. And I'm like, I think you just gotta do what worked for your baby. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but I'm glad to hear you say that, and I'm sure other moms will probably agree with you. You need less and more presence, I think. I think I and I don't know. I feel like a lot, well, just from my observation of little kids, I feel like those kids want their parents' attention, and I feel like technology and stuff is more the way that now. And then like videoing instead of being like in the moment with them. I just notice things and I don't want to be that parent, you
No,
know.
I totally understand what you're saying. And I really agree with you. It's interesting because, sometimes if you're out and about, you'll see, it makes sense, right? I mean, we
Mhm,
have the convenience of the technology. Um, and so there's that, it's really cool that, whenever you want to take a picture of a kid, you don't have to pull out this giant, back in the day, it's like, oh, did you bring the camera with you? It's like you just have a phone. And
yeah.
so, that's fine. But so often I see parents, and I'm sure I've done this too, certainly with the first two, um, before I had some of the awareness I have now. But it's like you see them and they're always videoing, but they're always like looking at the phone, right? Because you're trying to take the
Mhm,
video, but you're not actually looking at the kid. And so you're looking at the kid through the phone, but it's different. And
mhm,
so something I'm realizing is that like with my baby, when I look at her, it's different looking at her than it is when I'm like taking a picture,
mhm,
And sometimes I have to tell myself, okay, put the phone down and it's your memory, you know what I mean?
mhm,
So it's going to be up here. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. I also think, you brought up that, kids want the parents' attention. I think that's true. And I think it makes me kind of sad, but I understand as well, especially with younger parents. Like I think about like my siblings, right? And their generation, they didn't grow up without technology, right? I'm a millennial, so I'm kind of in that space where I still knew what it was like when I was in uh cell phones didn't come out until I was probably like in like like freshman, like around that kind of time. Like I was
mhm.
probably like I didn't have my first phone until I was like 15 or 16. You know what I mean? It's like unheard of these days. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like,
About
but
the
back
same.
then, yeah, but before then, like we just wasn't a thing. And so you kind of knew how to entertain yourself, and like with my siblings or my parents worked a lot, and so we would just entertain each other, so you had to be a lot more creative.
Mhm.
And I think that with, you mentioned like the kids want the attention from their parents. I think that's true because um and sometimes I wonder if they just want less stimulation, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of times they're overstimulated,
Yeah.
especially with like them like during dinner. Like I'll see. them put the little screen up, and I'm like, bruh. And then they'll give them a phone again so they can have their like adult conversations, which I understand. But then again, like the kids like, hey, or I see too many times at restaurants where everybody's on their phone and the kid's just like, hey, mom, hey, hey. And she's like, not right now. But needless to say, some people need to mentally decompress from whatever they've been doing all day.
Mhm.
But I feel like there's like a catch 22, I guess. But I do feel like they're overstimulated. And I also feel like kids today don't know how to play.
No, I think that that's true, and I think that, yeah, I think that that's true. What I would say about the screens, it's tough because I definitely understand what it's like, to have a kid and they're going nuts, or you have multiple children and they all
Mm-hmm.
want attention, they all, and it's so easy. It's like it's effortless,
It
right?
is.
It's
Mm-hmm.
effortless to just hand them a screen and then they do their own thing. But the problem with that is parenting isn't supposed to be effortless. I don't believe that it is, right? So,
No.
with the screens, you're right, it is a catch 22, right? Because there's certainly benefits to it, but I would say like long term, it's probably, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, right? But I'm sure I can't imagine that it's very good, right?
Mm-hmm.
To
I
to to have that, and then to the other thing too. I didn't mean to cut you off, Emily, but you had said that they don't know how to play.
mm-hmm.
100%. Yeah, I think everyone needs creativity, and to have that screen, I think definitely takes some of those opportunities
Mm-hmm.
away for sure.
I feel like they don't have time to be bored enough to use their imagination. And I remember when I used to be a teacher and I had like kindergartners or pre-Kers, like they're like, we don't know what to do. So I would make up like games for them to do. And then eventually towards the end of the year, they were like doing things.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, I think there's just, like you said, stimulation. I feel like there's just so much going on, like either from extracurriculars or doing, like I said, extracurriculars, um, to like doing the tablets or the computer, what have you. And I know like some parents that what's works for them and that's good for them. But I do believe kids just need a little bit attention from their parent. And I don't know,
Well,
but I think it's probably harder if you have multiple children as well, I'm sure.
it definitely can be more difficult, but I guess I don't know, like, I don't mean to offend anybody, but at the same time, I think it just depends on how you see having children and how you see your
Mhm,
children, right? Like if you see your kids as, and sometimes it can feel this way, and I understand why someone would be stressed out, especially, you have single parents, you have all kinds of different parenting
mhm,
situations where your time is limited and your energy is low, right? And so you
mhm.
have all these different things pulling you in different directions. But I don't know, I feel like when you're a parent, right? I mean, that is the most important. I believe it. I really believe this. If you have children, it's the most important thing you'll do is to raise your children,
Mhm.
right? um and the thing is that a screen cannot cannot replace you. And
Mm,
the thing is, it's I guess, and then I guess here's my fear, right? And here's why we have the rules that we have with screens and everything in my house, is because I've seen too many of my own peers, right? Even, like people in my siblings' generation, or if they're younger and everything. And it's like all they know is the phone. They're educated by the phone or the
mhm,
tablet. They're socialized by the phone or the tablet. And so all of these, human skills, right? What it is to be a human being in the world, and and you're taught like how to see yourself and your own worth and other people around you, right?
mhm.
All these like measuring sticks that exist in the world, right? You're learning them from a screen as opposed to learning them from your parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I don't believe, right, like that anybody's value system, should come from what they see on the internet. Like that
Yeah.
seems very like dehumanizing to me, right?
Mhm,
It should come from your family and your parents and your human community, right? Like,
Mhm.
like the people who are physically actually like in your life. Obviously you get influences from the outside. I mean, that's always been the case, right? I mean, TV's been around forever. I'm sure that,
Yeah.
in the 80s and the 70s and
It's
before,
probably like too much TV.
yeah, exactly, for sure. But the problem is, you couldn't take your, like
With you.
yeah, your 35-inch giant box like with you, to the restaurant and like,
Yeah.
what I mean? So even for even like, the kids, maybe you got like latchkey kids or or people who like consumed a lot of television, right?
Mhm.
Um, Even for those folks back in the day before the modern technology that we had, you still get some reprieve. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, it's not because even now in school, it's like they get, I know a lot of places where, so my siblings, right, like I said, from New England, and they all got like their little Chromebook, and like that's how they,
They
and to
work
me
and
it's
stuff.
bizarre. Yeah, to me it's bizarre because I'm like, well, I'm like pen and paper,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's just, I mean, that 2000s wasn't that long ago.
Mm.
So it's kind of interesting, how that changes. But yeah, I would say the screens are a tough one because it's an easy, like, here you go, but here's what I would say. If you start off not doing that, it's a lot easier to manage as they get older. If you give your baby a screen, okay, it's a lot of self-sabotage happening there, right? It's a
Mhm.
lot hard, like, if you kind of try to handle it from the get-go when they're very, very small, then over time, right, you'll be
Mhm.
if you're consistent enough and not giving them the screen all the time, you find other avenues, you give them a book, you give them, a play thing or something like that. Then over time, it definitely gets a lot easier.
Mhm.
And then when they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, then they start to learn, right? But if you start off giving like your baby a screen, then becomes harder because then they're used to it, right? And
Mm.
it's a lot more difficult to undo something than it is to put the effort in initially.
Mm.
That's what I would say. So it takes some effort in the beginning, okay, and then it'll get easier. Or what you can do is put, again, if you want it to be a little bit more effortless, a little bit easier in the beginning, you can do that. But then there's way more effort trying to undo the thing.
Mhm.
Like, because once we have our habits, we have our habits.
Yeah. Do you think, like since with all your wisdom of being a mom for your three, do you think you're doing a little things more differently? I know you said like you're being more present, but like rearing them, do you think you're doing a little bit differently with this one that you have now?
Yeah, and so I would say yes, and only because I'm starting to see um the impact of what's the best way to put this? So I'll use the screens as an example,
Mhm.
right? My son was born in 2011,
Mhm.
and back then, right, like, screens were still a thing. Um, you know, but they weren't as much of a thing. Technology wasn't the same way, wasn't as advanced as it is now, obviously. You know, a tablet back then was much more expensive than a tablet is
Yeah.
now, right? And so even for parents to have access to something, like the average parent to have access to some of these things, right? You wouldn't necessarily. But now it's like, but now you can give your kid a phone, you don't blink twice because if, whatever, you get a new phone, right? For some people. Um, and so what I would tell you is back then, we didn't do screens when he was a baby just because it wasn't like in my nature to do so. I've always been a big book person. I love reading. And so I just focus a lot on the literature. But like if my sibling was in town or if we had a friend or whatever, I wouldn't really think twice about giving him like, oh, here, just watch this, whatever.
Mhm.
And so I wouldn't be as like vigilant about it.
Mhm.
But fast forward now, it's 12 years, right? And you see his peer group, and a lot of people in his age group, and it's like this, you know what I mean? Like they're on
Mhm.
their phone, and my sense is that they're not socialized the same way, right? You ever notice like a lot of young people are very socially awkward,
Yeah,
like they won't
like
look you in the face.
yeah, or dinner time, they're all on their phone, and I cannot stand phones at dinner no more because I'm like, conversate with me.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing, right? So I guess the difference is that back then I didn't know what the consequences would be,
Mhm.
right? If I didn't care. And
Yeah.
now it's like she doesn't have the screen, but because I don't want, I don't want her to have the same kind of social struggles maybe, or, same kind of I don't want her to have the same struggles as the people in my kids, peer group.
Mhm.
Like I know it's crazy, like, but my 12-year-old doesn't have a phone. My 9-year-old doesn't have a phone. I think it's nuts. Like, and I
Mhm.
understand like people have their reasons for doing it. For me, it doesn't make sense. For
Right.
my family, it doesn't make sense. And I would tell you, like, because heard the argument like, well, do you want them to feel left out? Do you want him to
Ooh,
feel
that's
like,
a good question.
socially weird? And the answer is, I've asked them the question, but the thing is, if you raise them a certain way, right, then they're just accustomed to it. And then when the
Yeah.
friends say, hey, why don't you have a phone? He just says, well, because my mom doesn't want me to have one. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what else do
Yeah.
I say? But what I would tell you though too is, as a parent, because you're right, you don't want your kids to be socially ostracized, right? That's no
Yeah.
fun. And so you find like different avenues around it, right? I mean, they have different things. Like, so he doesn't have a phone, but he can still contact. He's got this little watch, right?
Mhm.
It's not doesn't have the same, doesn't have any apps that you can use, doesn't have any like no internet browsing access, right? Which really is the main concern for me, right? Because
Mm.
I feel like you could put so many parental controls and somehow
They
it's
still
always
get
some kind of shit.
around. They
Yeah, and that's the
still
thing.
figure out, and then you
Yeah,
hear all them horror stories, and you're
yeah,
just like,
exactly.
no.
And so for me, right, and that's the thing for me, like the aversion for all of that comes from even when I was a kid, when the technology was first coming out. Some of my peers, some of my siblings' peers, some of the horror stories just from back then. And now technology is so much more advanced, the way that, that the data, yeah, like
Mhm.
how that's, how they have your data, and like, and how, like just all the things, right?
Mhm.
It's like the world has more access to your kid now than it ever did. And
Yeah.
I think for me, like, that freaks me out. And I'm just someone who errs on the side of caution,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So what I would tell, I guess again, long-winded roundabout way of answering your question, Emily, is yeah, so I don't even remember now, but back in the day I did things a certain way, I guess from a place of, it's just how I did them, but I didn't really think twice about a lot of stuff. And
Mhm.
now you just become more vigilant because you see, especially when it comes to technology, because we're now, 10, 15 years in, 20 years in, and so you're starting to see the consequences of some of the stuff from back then
Yeah.
that we didn't have the data,
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Like, because I just like, when I'm thinking about how I want to like raise my kid when eventually I ever have one, uh, I see things, I'm like, I really don't want to do that. But I know like there's gonna be times where I'm just like, here, you know. But I just keep in mind that I just don't make a habit of it, I guess.
No, you're right. I think it's the awareness, right? It's like,
Hmm.
well, I mean, I think that's true for anything, right? If you do
Hmm.
everything mindfully, as long as you're not being mindless about anything you do, I think that's
I
fine. It's
I
just being
think that's
aware.
the struggle for some, I think, is the mindfulness. Because a lot of us, I hate to say this, but we are kind of mindless because like we've done work all day. We don't want to think, like we don't want to do, like we're just dead. But I think
Yeah,
that also has to do with like America's whole work culture and
yeah,
all that stuff, which
absolutely.
thank
Lots of
goodness for remote work from home for some, because I'm sure that helps a lot. But the people that have to work, I feel for you because, whoa, like go out and do like a 40-hour work week. Oh my God,
yeah.
I die. But yeah. So do you think when it comes to money, do you think both your money mindset has changed since having kids or even like more kids, or has it stayed the same?
Ooh, money mindset. That's
Hmm.
that is it's not a loaded question, but it's a loaded question. So, it's weird. Like money mindset has always been like just a thread
Hmm.
throughout my life. So like I said, in the beginning, I come from very blue collar, right? So
Hmm.
money was not a resource that was plentiful.
Hmm.
Um, and I've heard this a lot, with people that I've worked with too, where, you notice the people who really don't come from a lot,
Hmm.
um, there's certainly more. when it comes to money mindset, more things surrounding like scarcity mindset, right? And like making decisions from that place, and fear and this and that, but also a lot of people, I work with is, when it comes to money mindset, if they've come from a place where they've not had a lot, they also, this is what I found out, okay, is that people either take that experience and they end up having a lot of abundance, or they spend every penny that they get, okay? And so for me, right, for me, I've been in both places, right? I've been in the place where I've spent every penny that I had, and then I've been in a place where it's like, especially now, I would say, definitely coming to terms with the fact that I probably can't work forever. So to answer your question, yes, having kids has definitely changed my money mindset. But I would say maybe not like change it at its core, but definitely change like how, again, how vigilant I am. It's
Mhm.
weird because I feel like having kids just made me vigilant all the way around,
Mhm.
just more focused on certain things. And so what I would say is, firstly, right, so having children, you definitely, um, you definitely, or I, right, consider more. So when I made a purchase, when I was, okay, I'll give you an example. When I was like, 18, right, I was a senior in high school. Remember, I told you I was kind of a hermit. And so all I would do is work, right? And so I would work and work and work and work. And so I had, decent money saved up. And then I would, save up all my money and then spend it all in the summer on concerts, right? That's just what I did,
Fun
right?
experiences.
Yeah, exactly. And I think now, yeah. And so I think now, with money, it definitely forces you to be more creative, right? So yeah, I want to have fun experiences, but I don't want to spend, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars every time I go have a fun experience, right? So it definitely forces you to play more, be more imaginative, which I actually like. I actually do think that that's a gift, right? I don't look at that as like, oh, I have to, it's scarcity. I don't have this. I don't have these resources. So it's forcing me to be creative. I actually like playing, right? I actually like the fact that instead of, going somewhere or spending the money, right? It forces me, it's kind of interesting because it kind of forces me to be present, right? I'm not going to go spend hundreds of dollars to go here. We're just going to stay home and we're going to have a board game night, or we're going to go and,
Mhm.
build something, right? So there's that. But also you start to consider, and maybe it's a little bit, maybe I'm a little bit more hyper focused just because I kind of work in finance. Um, you start to realize the older you get and the more kids you have, that the resources are finite. Um, and what I mean by that, it's not so much that like, you can't make more money, but something I've learned in my life, Emily, is that, your greatest asset, certainly from a provider perspective, okay, is your ability to earn a living, to earn an income. And you don't have that forever, right? We all hit a certain age, some of us, sometimes it's not even an age thing, sometimes it's an ability thing, right? Like I have people in my family worked every day of their life, but their bodies just are not able to sustain that anymore, right? And so if you're not making sure that you're being very mindful of how you manage your resources, um, that really does sneak up on you, right? And I've
Mhm.
seen people, and what's really interesting, Emily, is some of the people I've worked with, they've made the same, so you can take person A, family A, family B, they make the same amount of money throughout their life. Family A has nothing by the time they're 50 or whatever. Family B has some abundance still. And
Mhm.
you think about it and it's like, I feel like there's a fallacy that you need to make a lot of money to have a lot of money, and I just don't believe that that's true. I think
Mm.
it's about the behaviors. And
Mhm.
so to answer your question, when I was younger, right, with my son, like in my
Mhm.
early 20s, um, I definitely was very mindful, like, okay, I need to make sure I'm saving. I need to make sure that, that we have a house and, like we have shelter and he has clothing and he can eat, all these different things. But I definitely self-sabotaged a lot because in my head I was like, well, we don't have this because I just don't make as much. Right. And now with this child, I'm not independently wealthy. So you still have finite resources, but I guess my approach is a little bit different in that my ability to provide for her future, and to make sure that my husband and I provide for our own future so that we're not putting that on our children, right?
Mhm,
Because culturally, that can be a thing. I come
mhm.
from an Asian culture, and so you take care of your parents, and I'm sure we will take care of our parents, but I don't want that for my kids, right? I don't want them to have to take care of mom
Right.
and dad, right? So, um, what was it? Where was I going with that? Yeah. So that being the case, now I'm realizing that, and it actually makes me feel very empowered. This idea that it's not how much money I make, it's about how I choose to behave and how I choose to make the choices. And so I guess what I would say is, in regards to money mindset, my money mindset has changed in that in the beginning, right? Early on, I thought that most of my ability to accomplish things I wanted to accomplish were directly tied to the amount of money I was making. And now, right, that same goal is more tied to the choices that I'm making with the resources that I have.
Mm,
That makes sense.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. It's not about how much money you make, it's how you use it.
I mean, that's
And
absolutely true. Yeah. And
which
it's
I
very,
I
go
feel
ahead.
like a lot of people probably neglect that, but
Well, it can be
I am
confronting,
guilty.
and well, I've certainly me too, but I think that for a lot of folks, it's very confronting,
Hmm.
right? Or it can be like that you are the reason, I mean, there's obviously outside influences, right? I mean, there's a
Right.
lot of
Like,
environmental outside influences that can impact someone's relationship with money, that can affect, where they are with their money. I mean, but I don't know, and I know it's anecdotal, right? It's not a statistic, but
hmm
I've seen plenty of people who have nothing, and with a little bit of, with just a few little behavioral changes, a few little things that they do differently, it's not overnight,
hmm
right? But they have something, and they come from they go from a place where there's like a lot of anxiety around money, and they just a lot of this scarcity mindset, and then all of a sudden, right, it's like little by little with the same income, you
hmm
know like we get to a place that's much more comfortable.
hmm
Speaking of, screen time, just to kind of circle back around to that again, like that technology and always in your face, and kids always, like seeing it, it's like, oh, well, I have to have this, I have to have this. And so I think it's weird too, I think, what we're teaching our young people about money, and about wealth and what that means, I think I don't think that helps either.
hmm
So, um, yeah, and so, I feel like, especially with young people, I'm sure that a lot of their money mindset probably comes from, a lot of it comes from your home life, but
hmm
I'm sure a lot of it also comes from, social media and all of that.
Yes, like you will not believe like the sponsorships and stuff like, oh, this does this, or like this vitamin does this, or you gotta have this because if you don't, you're not gonna look like this. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, wow, it's like a consumer base, I guess, but I mean that's how people make their money, right?
Yeah.
But it's just wild to me. And or like when you go out to eat or something, you buy your food, but you don't tip, which is interesting as well. I
People do
can,
that?
yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Like, I have a couple of friends that are servers and they're not bad servers, mind you. They're like if I had to go to a restaurant and they were my server, I'd choose them over
Yeah.
some others, right? But sometimes like they have like a good $100 tab and they're doing like their best and like they give them like zero, or they'll give them like $5 on $100 tab, and I'm like, and I try to keep positive with them. I'm like, well, at least you got some and not zero. They're
I
like,
wonder,
ah.
how much do you think of that is cultural, and how much of it do you think is just um yeah, I mean, I guess when I say cultural, I mean, because, like in other places, right?
Mhm.
It's not
They
a thing.
don't tip.
Yeah, and
But
so I
I
wonder.
I just think it's just like at your one of your regular American restaurants
Yeah.
that local people go to like all the time. And they
What do
just,
you
or like
what
big parties, like they don't like tipping either. Some of
what
them,
do
not
you what
all.
do you attribute that to? Like, why do you think people do that, or
I
don't
just don't
don't
think
do that?
they, I just don't think they just want to tip or give extra, or they might be in a financial situation where they just can eat food and not tip. don't know. Might be that,
Okay,
but
so I have so something interesting, right? So you said that, and it just brought back like my mindset and how I had a pivotal moment years ago, and I think it changed a lot of my approach to like spending. Certainly food for me, and everyone's got their own like thing, right? So for me, it's like stationery.
right.
Maybe I'm on Pinterest, but I don't know. But like stationery, pens, and like office supplies, and then like food, right? Just
Hmm.
so. But it's interesting that you say, it's like maybe they have enough to eat, like eat at the restaurant, but not tip. Everybody's different. Okay, I
Right.
understand that. For me, I just was always, because I definitely worked in food services, right? For at least five years when I was younger.
Hmm.
And for me, it's just one of those things where if you don't have enough, my own mindset, if you don't have enough money to tip, right, you don't have enough money to go to a restaurant. You know what I mean? It's just what in
Uh,
the it's certainly in the United States, right? And again, like I know culturally, like some people it's different, but me,
yeah.
where I grew up, it just was a thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because something I remember with my parents, like it's just so weird. Like I said, not a lot of resources.
Hmm.
Definitely worked hard for every single penny that they earned to give us the very, the best that they could. But I remember like when we would go out to eat, and something my parents just hammered into us was, when you go out to eat, right? Like you just tip your server. And my parents were very like good tippers, and they still are. And it always, my mind when I was a kid, I was like, okay, like that's interesting. I remember my dad telling me it's like these people work just as hard as we do, you know. And that was one thing. That's weird story. That's one of the reasons how I knew that I was gonna marry my husband when I was a kid, right? It was just hammered. You treat your servers with respect. It's just what you do.
Hmm.
Okay. Anyone in any kind of service industry. And so what's funny is when my husband and I went out to eat when we were, super, super young in California, in the military, he just was so nice. Like we went out to this like Chinese restaurant and just like a little hole in the wall. He was just so nice to them and so polite. And I thought, wow, like, and for some reason, like, and that's the thing when people ask me now, like, what was it? Like, it's weird, but that probably was what it
Kindness.
was. Yeah, just like being just having manners. And
Yep.
that's what my dad always told me. He's like, you don't need to have money to have manners. Yeah.
Right.
And
Because
I
there's
was like,
people with
okay,
money that don't have
that don't
manners.
have manners, right? So that is not manners are not a class thing. That's just like
Just how
like
you were
yeah,
raised.
exactly. So
Definitely
that's so
agree.
that's kind of interesting. That people that and the comment that made me think of that. But the pivotal thing I was telling you about.
Hmm.
So kind of to piggyback on this idea of you don't have enough to tip, you don't have enough to go, years ago, right? I remember there was like when we really didn't have like, we were starting out and we didn't have anything. And I remember like we were really hungry and we wanted to go to Taco Bell, right? I don't know why. Um, but I remember having till I was looking at my bank account, and this is like so embarrassing, but I feel like
Yes.
whatever. Yeah. Um, but I remember like looking at the bank account and like having to transfer, from one account to like another account because the money, is attached to a certain card. And I had this epiphany, Emily. I was like, if I'm having to transfer dollars and cents, okay, from one account to another to
Take
barely
it
make
home.
it, yeah, to swipe the card at Taco Bell, I don't have enough money to go to Taco Bell.
Right.
Go home, like go get some ramen, go eat some mac and cheese. Like you don't have enough money for this.
Hmm.
And it was the most humbling experience for me because I'm like, wow, I don't have enough money to go eat Taco Bell like that, because
Right.
but I feel like yeah, I don't know, it's something that came to mind, as you were talking about it, but it's like, and I think that's the kind of the mindset, that really can be detrimental to
Hmm.
people, right? It's like, and that's, you spend every penny you have, right? But yeah, that was a very sobering experience for me, like having to look at myself and say, I don't have enough money for Taco Bell.
Right. I feel like that's probably like a good value your parents instilled in you. Because when I was younger, my mom separated from my father. So she was basically a single parent. She was working like a minimum wage job at a restaurant. and we lived in this little camper. And so I don't know if you ever lived in a camper for like a week or something on trip or something. Well, anyway, sometimes campers can be funny, and we didn't have like a new camper. Like it was a somebody let us borrow it so we wouldn't be homeless, right?
Yeah.
Um, we my mom worked so much that she didn't have like our refrigerator that we had was like this little like mini fridge thing, but
Mhm.
it doesn't keep cold for very long. So we would never be able to like cook food unless we did like little sandwich meat and ramen. And that's why I hate ramen to this very day, because I ate it so much, because it was also cheap,
Yeah.
inexpensive. But if we were to ever go out, it would be like to McDonald's back when they had the actual dollar menu. We would eat that like all the time. And I couldn't understand like why I couldn't get a Happy Meal. And back then I was a kid, I was being selfish, whatever. But now growing up, I understand, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You
so
share
I
the
think
Twinkies.
that so if you have to live off fast food, like I get it, understand it. But you don't have to have like the most expensive thing on the planet. Uh, but yeah, if you can't go to a restaurant and you can't tip, there's like other places you can go that, you don't have to tip. But it's possible. It's possible to eat out and still not have enough money.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just very interesting from going from like little money to like from watching my mom really growing. And then when my mom got with the stepdad that I had, it was a very interesting dynamic. Like we had a little bit of money, but we were still like lower class, like we like blue collar work
Yeah.
type
Yeah.
thing. So I couldn't get everything. I couldn't go to like the mall and get clothes unless it was like for like a special occasion. Like I'd be thrifting, which there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. I still
Yeah.
like to do that every now and then, right? And but then when I became a teacher and then I had a significant other, I had like a lot more. So I think I was the type of person that like spent it because I didn't have like that money mindset, but I still paid my bills before I spend anything. So I did kind of have that mindset.
Yeah.
But where I'm at right now, like I've told you a long time ago, like I'm in that scarcity mindset right now because I'm like, I don't have
Yeah.
this or this. So I feel like that mindset, I feel like if you have a good mindset, you'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, so do you think that the scarcity mindset just comes from, growing up and like
I
knowing what it's not to
I
have,
think
or?
it does. Because I'm like, oh, like, because I was used to going from nothing to like, oh, making sure every penny count
Mm-hmm.
to not having to worry so much. And now I'm back to not making sure every penny counts, but making sure I just have that enough. But I'm like, I will always have enough type thing, but I
Yeah.
can have more if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
trying to push myself there and not be so much in the scarcity. But if I add so let me say this, like, what would you say to somebody who would want to have a kid or they're
Mm-hmm.
about to have a kid, but they have like little income? What would you say to that person?
Ooh. So, um, the first thing I would say is, um, I mean, so that's a tough one just
Mhm.
because, I mean, so little money can mean a lot of different things,
Right,
right? To a lot of different people. Because that's definitely a spectrum. So what little bit to me is not necessarily the same as what is a little bit to somebody else.
mhm.
Um,
Well,
a
let's
li-
just say like I'll give an example. Let's just say like a minimum wage job. They don't
yeah,
have that
okay.
and they're expecting their first. Let's just give
Oh,
that
so okay,
example.
so they're already expecting.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's different. Okay,
Yeah,
so what I would tell you is, it's if you don't already have a kid, okay, but you want one, then I'm definitely, there are some people in this world, and it's like, well, you have to have all these ducks in a row before you have a kid.
right,
Okay, I'm not one of those people. I feel like there's always a reason to not have a kid, and you can always come up with
right.
one to have a kid, and it's like the timing is never going to be perfect. Whatever. But what I would tell you is, if you're not already expecting, but you want to have a child, I would definitely make sure, and actually I've done this, right? Whenever I've done, like, so working with people, and we go over their goals. And one of the goals, I've had some clients, and that their goal is to have a kid, and so we make that a goal, and we say, okay,
Mhm.
when you have a kid by, and then we actually plan for that, right? And make sure you put away money. In the scenario that you're talking about, Emily, where they're already expecting,
Mhm.
okay, and they're not already, so the baby is going to be here, but they're working maybe a minimum wage job. What I would say is, um, this: the baby's already coming, okay? You just have to do the best that you can, and don't focus on, because I mean, honestly, like, the baby industry is such, I mean, it's out there, it's in your face, especially when, most parents, before they have a kid, they do all this research, and there's all this stuff, and there's all these things. Okay, take it back to basics. Anytime you're facing that kind of deadline, um assuming that you're not, like, in a situation where, it's like you're homeless or something like that, but you have minimal, so your minimum wage job, you're squeaking by. Okay, and so I'm taking your question to mean, how do you prepare for a baby in that situation?
Mhm.
um yeah, so what I would say is, come up with a plan where before the baby is here, try to learn a budget, okay, that you're going to have to be on when the baby is here. So I'll give you an example, okay? I had a client who was in a similar situation, and the budget was kind of tight, but this is what I find, Emily. I feel like most people, there's things, if you kind of pull back the curtain and look at your budget there, I think that there are things that probably you could take out, right? Replace something else. But what you don't want to do is, here's the baby, and now we have to live a completely different lifestyle, right? And actually, this is true for any big purchase that's coming up, right? When people want to buy a car, I always say, okay, for 6 months, go ahead and take that car payment out already, right? And
Mhm.
then see how that lifestyle feels, right? And then that way, when you go to buy the car, it's not the same thing. Same thing with the baby. So if you know that you're going to have to pay for diapers, if you know that you're going to have to pay for formula potentially, right? Do the best that you can from the time that you find out, that you're going to have a kid, until the kid is here, to put that stuff away, right? So if you know that when you go to the grocery store, you do your grocery budget or whatever, you go to the grocery store, go ahead and take aside, $40 or whatever it is, right, for diapers, and just set it aside and don't spend it. That does two things. The first thing that it does is it forces you to really feel,
Mhm.
okay, and experience what it's going to be like when the kid is here and you don't have that money. Okay, because
Mm.
I think one of the biggest issues that people who are in that situation face is not necessarily even not having the money, because that's okay, that's obvious, right? Because I think most people in their brain, they're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to have less money, right, if I'm in that situation. But there's a difference between knowing that you're not going to have the money and actually having the shock of not having the money. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Yeah, so there's two
That's good
different.
advice.
Yeah, so that's number one, is really try to financially live like you would live if you had a kid. The second thing that does is, if you're able to, okay, maybe you're not in a situation where you can take $40 for diapers and put it away. Okay, so take 20, right? Just decrease whatever, your standard of living is the best you can, right? To try to simulate what it's going to be like with a
Mhm.
baby, and set that money aside. So the second thing that does, number one, now you're feeling what it's like when you actually have a kid, right? You're feeling the financial difference, strain, right? Maybe. But because you're putting that money aside, okay, now you're creating a little cushion. Okay.
Mm.
So you're forcing yourself to create, whatever you can afford, right? It doesn't have to be $40. So you can afford $5, right? It's this mindset, it's this behavior of moving money to the side. And that's the biggest difference between having a kid and not having a kid. Not having a kid, you can conceptualize in your brain all the things. Okay,
Mhm.
having a kid, you actually have to put the behaviors to work. You actually have to do the thing, right? You can't.
Right.
You're no longer imagining what it's like to change a diaper. You actually have to change the diaper, and so but the more you change a diaper, the better you get. So that's what I would say. Number one is, get yourself prepared to be in the financial situation that you're going to be in. I've seen a lot of
Mm.
people say, "Well, the baby's going to be here. We got some time." To
Nope.
me, that is self-sabotaging. because you don't want to have to deal with the stress of an actual child being here that you have to keep alive, on top of the anxiety and stress of, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much it was going to cost, right?
Mm,
Have that realization before the baby's here,
that's a good,
so that you're
that's a
not
good.
dealing, yeah, so that you're not dealing with all of the strain, all of the emotional stuff that comes with it. Do you know what I'm
Mhm,
saying?
mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's number one, what I would do. Try to simulate the financial situation as best you can while stocking away as much as you can. Secondly, what I would say is there's a real desire to buy all the things, right? So, and it's like actually like a biological thing. Again, not a doctor, but I kind of understand. So there's this term, it's called like nesting, right?
Mhm.
Where you clean your house, you prepare. It's where you're like preparing for the baby to be here. And that's what, where I've seen people really, that's where it's like they have all the stuff and you're researching all the things. And so what I would say is if you're in a situation where you're financially constrained, you know the baby is coming, you know you're gonna have a child, focus on the basics. And this is kind of what I did with my little baby now, right? So with my son, it was like we had a lot of different things, and all this kind of stuff. With my daughter, it was a little bit less. With my first daughter, it was a little bit less of a strain, just because we kept a lot of stuff, right?
Mhm.
We were expecting her, but obviously, when you have your first baby, you don't have the things. So it's kind of funny. So this time around, we definitely started over, but I approached it differently. So what I would say is don't focus on the like amount of things, because it's like the baby industry is a lot like the like cooking or baking industry, where it's like you have one thing. It's like you have, instead of having a baking pan, you have a donut maker. You know what I mean? It's like so
Yeah.
specific. Like all these things are so specific. You don't need all the things. Okay, you need diapers. Okay, so however you choose to do that, you need diapers. You need to be able to, so go back to the basics, right? You need shelter, food, and clothing. Those are your basic necessities.
Mhm.
So when you're looking and you're trying to, when you're in that nesting period, um, focus on those things. What do you need to clothe, feed, and shelter your baby? Okay. And that's one of the reasons I say if you can stock away money, do so, because making sure you have to have a place to live, right? If you have a house, or if you have some, you want to make sure you have some savings in case, got to fix your roof, you got to fix the sink, you got, these things. So that's really important. Um, but then when it comes to like the stuff, if you can find things, this is what I would say. Spend your money on the things that the baby is going to use the longest. Okay. So I know a lot of people, they focus on the baby clothes because they're so cute, like all
They
these
grow
different,
out of them
they grow out of them like
so
that.
quick.
And a lot of times you won't even, I mean, the baby, depending on your kid, like can grow so fast that you can have clothes that they don't even use.
Mhm.
And so what I would say, I mean, this is me. People would disagree. People, there's people who are much more educated than me in this space, but just as my own anecdotal experience, okay, when the baby is tiny, tiny, I mean, I have about like 7 days, 7 to 10 days worth of like clothes, if that makes sense. Because you're going to do laundry anyway, you know what I mean? You don't need
Yeah.
30 onesies or 20 onesies. As your kid gets older, it's a little bit different, right? Because they stay in them longer. But when they're like small, don't go crazy on the clothes. Like I had a friend, and there, her husband does like yard goes to like yard sales, and brought me a box of like so much stuff, you know what I mean? And it was like $50 for like the whole thing. I got like a baby bath. I got like, I mean, it was so much. I was so grateful. I mean,
Mhm.
it was, yeah, it was wonderful. So you can find these things, don't spend a lot of money. They don't need to be brand new. They don't need to come from, these expensive places. So that's number one. I would say when it comes to baby clothes, you don't need to go extravagant, because I feel like that's where a lot of people do spend their money.
Or like
Um,
baby shoes.
yeah,
And they don't even walk.
yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I understand, like I get
They're
why people do it.
cute.
Yeah, because my son definitely had baby shoes. But if you're in a tight money, and if you can afford it and you like it, do. I mean, again, I'm
Yeah.
I'm speaking to the people who are in a little bit of a
Yeah.
money crunch. Okay, if you're in a money crunch, you don't need to buy baby shoes. Um, this is what I always tell people. I say, that the cutest baby is a happy one.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what they're wearing. if your kid's smiling and your kid's happy and is
As long as they're
loved.
clean
Yeah,
and
exactly.
fed,
Exactly.
it'd
Absolutely.
be
So
all right.
baby clothes right off the bat is not where I would spend the money. Secondly, if you can find things that do have multiple functions, right, then that's really great. So I'll give you an example. Well, I said before, so like a crib is really great because it's something that they're going to use, right? Like, obviously, it's going to be there for a while. If you can get one of those convertible ones, then I would definitely spend, a little bit of extra. And you don't have to spend crazy amounts of money. I know that there's so many reviews of all these things. Get something that's safe, okay? Like that's fine, so crib, I would definitely is a purchase. I would say about four for sure if I was going to have a kid. The mattress is really important too. What people don't think about the crib mattress, but that is a thing because I know the mattress that you need for a baby is different than the mattress that you can use for like an older
Toddler.
baby. Yeah,
Mm.
toddler, older baby. Just because they've got I think when they're smaller, I don't quote me on this 100%, but I think when they're smaller, they're supposed to be firmer, right? Because
Mm.
like SIDS and everything like that, like all that kind of stuff. It's supposed to be firmer so they don't I don't know, something with the breathing. But yeah, so if you have like we have a mattress where it like flips over or whatever, it's like so that's something. So crib mattress is important. And then I would say so car seat, obviously need a car seat. Stroller, right, is an important one. If you can get one, I really personally like the ones that you can actually like use, over time. And a lot of times they have like car seat stroller combos. Like I think we got one. It was a pretty good one. It was like, $120, right? I know that that can be kind of pricey for some people, but if you consider, you're getting the car seat and the stroller, so those are some things to consider, right? So multifunctional things. If you have like a swing, like we have a swing that turns into, like a baby rocker, again, multifunctional, right? Higher as the kid gets older. So things like that. Because I would tell you, Emily, like we don't have most of the things that we had for my son. We literally had when the baby was first born, we had a crib, we had a swing, and the car seat and the stroller, and that's it. So that's the other thing I would say as well, right? Is I think a lot of parents, they're trying to prepare for this baby to be here, but you will learn your baby and
Yeah.
your baby will learn you when the baby's here. So you might have a baby who just is not, they really love their swing. So if you really
Yeah.
love your swing or you really love your rocker, maybe they don't need a bouncer too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to consider is I feel like a lot of people try to have all the things at like before the kid is even here.
Mhm.
Just pace yourself. Just pace yourself.
Mm.
You know what I mean? You can take it over time. Like I remember when I was still pregnant, I really wanted this high chair. And I was like, why do I need a high chair? The kid can't even like doesn't even have a neck. You know what I mean? Like for the first couple of months. And so and so you can definitely pace yourself. It's okay to pace yourself. What I would tell parents who are in a financial bind, and they're expecting is, get the necessities, okay? And then the other stuff, clothes, things like that, you can get on the cheap. If you're able to nurse, a breast pump, right, is much cheaper than paying for formula if you're able to do that, um especially these days, for sure, right?
Mhm.
So that that's one of those. That's the other thing too. It's like, what can your body provide? Like,
If you have insurance, some insurances will actually buy you a breast pump, from what I
yep.
found out,
No, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
which is
They
interesting.
Yep, breast pump. Yeah, sometimes if you go to like your pediatrician, sometimes they have like formula there, that they'll give you here and there, right? There's all kinds of, you've got like WIC is a program, right?
I think
Um,
it's asking for help too,
yeah,
and
I
some
think that,
don't want to ask for help, like
yeah,
you said.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think this is how I feel. You should never be ashamed to reach out. If you're not able to do it on your own, right? Don't ever feel ashamed to reach out, to like to support your kid. You know what I mean? Like those things exist for a reason.
Mhm.
If you can do it on your own, that's fine. But don't either those things exist for a reason. That's what I will say. You know what I mean? Like my parents were always in the weird income bracket where it's like they really didn't make enough like to where it was super comfortable,
Mhm.
but they made too much to qualify for anything. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And so it's
I
like,
know what you mean.
Yeah, and it's a tough place to be, you know what I mean? But yeah, but I would say that there's definitely plenty of and that's the thing is there's so many organizations that will actually help that we just don't know about,
Yeah.
or it's not like, the obviously like the government programs are the number one thing, but there's a lot of private, private programs, organizations that do help with that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And what I would say too is like it's weird, and it's weird for me to say this because and maybe for some folks you won't understand, but it's like when the kid is here, you just figure it out. There's something that kicks in, Emily. I don't know if it's like an instinct or what it is, but you just figure it out. You know what I mean? Like you do what you can before the kid is here, and then they get here, and then there's some kind of parental thing, right, that kicks in, and you make it work, and you love your kid, and that's that.
Mm.
And I know that sounds stupid. I know maybe it sounds oversimplified. But I believe that. I've experienced that. I've seen my parents experience it, right? We didn't have all the things we wanted, but they always tried really
Yeah.
hard, you know? But yeah, but the more you can prepare, I think the biggest thing is just getting into the mindset of being a parent with a kid before you're a parent with a kid.
Mm. Good, good thoughts. Good thoughts.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that. Is there any last things you would like to say to the audience before we close this out, or share an email address or anything if they have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely, I don't know if you're able to put something in the link or
Mhm.
whatever, but yeah, that's fine if you have a question. But no, just thank you for your time. My opinions are my opinions. So like sorry if I offend anyone, but yeah, it's just parenting is the most meaningful thing that I've ever done. It's not just like marriage. I feel like the point is not to just like be happy. It's
Mhm.
it's to find meaning in these things. And what I will say, an old friend, I'll close out with this. I had an old friend once tell me, and he works for Google now, and he's very like likes data, likes analyzing data. And he told me that single people, right, without children, they've got like a very consistent like level of happiness, right? It's like not as much. I mean, they had their stressors for sure, but it's like different stresses, right? And it's like, but generally pretty even keel. With
Mhm.
parents, right? The joy to stress levels, it looks like a crazy mountain range where it's like the spikes here and it's like really low here. Um, but the spikes are higher than the people, right?
Mhm.
Without, yeah, who don't have the children. And so I don't mean that to say like everyone should have kids, but for me, I really enjoy it. And I will say that the worst moments of my life involve my children, and the best moments of my life involve my children, right? From an emotional standpoint. And I don't know, I guess for me, right, in those peaks and the valleys is where I find the meaning. And yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done, best thing I ever will do. Not saying it's for everybody,
Great.
but I don't know. I guess anyone who knows me knows I'm very, pro children, and
Yeah.
and I like, yeah, I just think it's really beautiful to see parents who love their kids,
Mhm.
teach their kids and rear their kids, and yeah, so that's it.
Well, I greatly appreciate it because I don't know if you ever look on TikTok or anything, or just browse. Uh, there's like a lot of kids people don't want to have kids, which is fine by them. But I'm just glad to see something like positive about somebody like, I love having kids. So I greatly appreciate it. As always, I'm Emily Ruth. This is Charlene, and I will hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you for listening to the Waking Alive podcast. If you like that episode, hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, you can find more episodes on Spotify under Awaken Alive or YouTube Emily Ruth Healer. I hope you all have a good one and have a good night.